I'd like to welcome you on today's webinar about what is DBT, also known as the Abo tool. We'll start with what DBT is, how it works, what was the evolution, and where it's heading in the future. Also, if you'll have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat and we will get back to them in the end of the presentation. Before we start, I'd like to shortly introduce myself. My name is Maciej Noah. I've been working with DBT for some time already. And in the meantime, I've been working, or I've successfully passed DBT Analytics Engineer certification, which is more about how developers use DBT. And then a DBT Cloud Architect certification, which is more about how we structure the DBT Cloud projects for developers to use them. Now, what is DBT? DBT is the standard for data transformation. It is currently used by more than 80,000 companies around the world. Some of the biggest ones I would say are from NASDAQ, and for the business users, the most famous one would be probably Duolingo. So even Duolingo uses DBT. And what it is. So it is the first SQL framework that enables analysts to work like developers or software engineers. And why is that? Let me tell you here. So DBT is working on the ELT principles, right? So first you'll need to extract and load the data into your warehouse, and then DBT lives on top of your warehouse. It doesn't really matter whether it's Snowflake, it's Redshift, BigQuery, Databricks, DuckDB. Databricks can connect to most of the ones that you can think of. And when it comes to the transformation part, like I said, it lives on top of the database. So in there you can develop, you can also test and document directly in the code, and then you can deploy it into multiple environments. Everything is happening on top of the database, so the data lives in the same database. There is no migration in between the databases. It is technically possible, but it's not the best practice. So before I dig deeper into what DBT is, let me start with the project. The project I've been working on, and it is called Carvago. The map image is just for illustrative purposes only, just to show you that we've been collecting data from all around Europe. When we were working on the projects, we were having some issues, right? I feel like every project has some issues, but the first one we were struggling with was that code is repeated. So we were approaching the data warehouse solution by building different layers. Some of you might call them bronze, silver, gold. Some of you might call them staging, core, and marts. Some of them might call you L0, L1, L2, L3. Basically, it means that you are transforming the data per source. And we had our own source standardization process, but it was defined for every single source separately. So if we wanted to change something, we had to go to each source and change the logic. With DBT, it is not the case, since you can define reusable logic in one place. Another issue we've had was that we were missing documentation. And I'm not really talking about missing SQL comments such as why did I use a where condition, or what is the meaning of this calculation, or why is there this kind of calculation. I'm talking about the business definitions, right? I'm talking about the business meaning of the columns or tables. And then there was a big one, missing data tests. In the solution where we were working with, or like the solution where we were working, was quite difficult to have some data tests. And we were spending hours and hours, especially during COVID, when the business users were coming and saying, oh, why do you have such a low volume of data? Are we missing something? Are the transformations correct? If we had DBT before, we would know that it is simple to apply the data tests, and we could prove to business very easily that our data are right. And now we had to prove that everything we do is working fine, and it was really the low volume of data because of COVID. And there's this big one, the last one. I've seen on the projects that they had developers and they were directly promoting into their production database. Again, it doesn't really necessarily have to be Postgres, right? It can be Snowflake, Databricks, or whatever. The main problem here is that the developer is directly promoting into database. With dbt, it is not the case. The developer has his own isolated environment. In Snowflake, they will have their own database, their own schemas. They will run it on their own feature branches, and they will have their own IDE where they can develop. Again, they are not touching anything in production. They have their own isolated environment. Once they develop the new features, they can move it into staging. Staging is something where you can actually test that everything that has been already developed is working fine. And once you test it on stage, you can successfully and happily move into production. And yeah, so what dbt really brings to the table? It brings the don't repeat yourself principles. You can define reusable code in one place and then use it wherever you want in the dbt project. You can also have the built-in docs, including the lineage. You will also have the built-in tests directly in the code, and you can have one code reusable across all of the environments. So yeah, this was dbt core. I've been talking about what it does theoretically. Now let's get a bit into practice. But before, like the last slide before we get to that, is that I will show you how it works. So dbt works on the principles that you will have SQL files, also called something like models. A model is an object in the database. It doesn't really necessarily have to be table or view, but we can just imagine it as a table right now to make it simpler. And for all of these SQL files, also called models or tables in our case, we have a YAML file. This YAML file is a configurational file for our model or table. What does it mean? That here I can define some parameters, documentation, and data tests. So you can see I have a model called staging customers, like I do here. And then I have a column, let's say ID. This is going to be the primary key. So I can write the description, the business description. This is a perfect one. This is the primary key of a customer's table. And then I also want to apply some data tests, right? This is a primary key. So I want to make sure that all of the values are filled and all of the values in the column are unique. So these were the principles, and let's dive into the demo. We'll start with Snowflake. For those who don't know, this is the Snowflake user phase. Here we can see that I have a database called Revolt demo. Beneath, I have a schema dbt source data. These are my raw data, right? And we have some tables: customers training, orders training, payments training, signups training. Let me start with the simple one. So here we have a table called payments training. Here we can see the contents of the table. Great. So we are now aware of what our source data look like. Let's move into dbt. For those, again, who don't know, this is a Visual Studio Code Editor. This is my IDE when I want to develop in dbt. So we'll start within the models folder. Like I said, we have a thing called a model, which is a database object. In here, I know that I want to create like a staging layer. So let's create a folder called staging. And within that folder, I need to tell dbt that I have my raw data stored somewhere. So I'll start writing this YAML, right? I have a source. I'll call it dbt demo. The data are in a database called Revolt demo and schema dbt source data. This comes directly from Snowflake, like I said. Here we have a database called Revolt demo, and then we have a schema called dbt source data. And in that schema, we have 4 tables. For my example, I'll only choose one table. So then I can define tables, and I will say payments training. Great. Now the sources are used to connect dbt with the database. So dbt knows where my raw data are. Let me create the first model. I'm going to call it staging payment. I'm going to create a SQL file, and I can select everything from my payments training. You see that here I have some kind of a helper. What you might notice is different here is that I'm not using or like typing the direct path to the table. This is why dbt is strong. So for example, now my data are living in Revolt BI database in schema dbt source data, but here I'm using the source function. So probably in your case, if the data on the source changed the location, you would have to rewrite all of the procedures or transformation. In here, you can just simply choose a different schema. So for example, here I have source data, but what if someone moved in from Snowflake dbt source data into dbt production data? So I will just change the schema here and dbt will know what to do. So let me switch it back to the real one. And now what I can do is I can write dbt run. And what it does is it is going to actually build the staging payments object in the database. Now we see that it is a view. We're going to have a view in the schema mnovec, and the table is going to be staging payments. So if I switch back to Snowflake, now I can see that we have a new schema mnovec with a view staging payments. Great. So this is how dbt connects with the sources. So, and that's not it. If we, let's say we want to create our core model, right? So I'm going to create a new folder like this. The folder structure is basically unlimited. It is just like a logical helper for you to understand what is happening in your project. And I'm going to call it payments. So I'm going to, again, select everything. And instead of source, I'm now going to use ref staging payments. Now, what you know, or what you might have noticed is that we are using currently the ref function instead of the source function. The reason is that when you're using the source function, you are connecting the database with dbt project. Once you are connected, you are referencing just the models within your dbt project. So let me show you another cool feature of dbt. Now, if I hit dbt run, since we are using the ref functions and the source functions, dbt actually knows what needs to be built first to be able to run the whole DAG. So the orchestration part here is very simple because dbt automatically knows what needs to be built first and what comes after, and you don't have to manage the steps in the orchestration yourself. Very strong feature. Okay, so now we've built two models, right? Again, we have my staging payments table. We can have, or like view in my case. We also have another model called payments. Great. What if I don't really want it to be a view? I just want it to be a table. So let's say I'm gonna go into dbt project YAML, which is like a centralized configurable storage for my project. And I'm gonna say that all of the tables or all of the models stored in the staging table will be materialized as view. But all of my core models, I want them to be materialized as a table. So now what is happening is that if I hit dbt run, the first layer is going to be built as a view. You can see it here. And then the second layer, the core layer, is going to be built as a table. What if I wanted to change it back to view? Not an issue. I can just rewrite it here, rerun, and everything that is happening on the background is that dbt knows that it is creating a view instead of a table. Now, what if I don't really like the mnovec here? I just wanted to know that I want the staging tables to be stored in the staging schema and my core models to be stored in the core schema. So if I hit dbt run again, just because we are in the development mode, I have my own schemas. But you can see that now I have a postfix schema. I have mnovec underscore staging and mnovec underscore core. Now we've seen this from the dbt perspective. Let's take a look at it from Snowflake perspective. Here we see that all of my schemas got successfully created, and we have payments view and a staging view. So I've been talking about how DBT works when it comes to building. I've also promised that I'm going to show you how to write tests. So let me define the YAML for the model. I'm going to say I have a model. The name is payments. The table has some description, let's say a model to aggregate payment data, whatever. The columns, I'm just gonna make it simple. We had a column ID, right? And this column has some description, unique identifier for each payment, and the data tests are going to be unique and not null. Now, I'm not gonna say dbt run, I'm gonna run dbt build. And what will happen now, again, dbt automatically knows where to build the tests. So you see the first layer was built as a first step. We have staging payments. Then we are building the core, the payments. And then we can see that we have two tests applied, not null and unique. We can see that all of the tests passed successfully. Now you may think this might be a bug. So what I'm gonna do is like I can artificially add another record, which is going to be a duplicate for the table. There's been payment method. I'm gonna say card, and then I'm gonna say 100 as an amount. So now if I had dbt build, and I'm just wanna run the payments now. So I'm gonna say dbt run dbt build select payments, and what is happening now? dbt will only run the payments model and the tests applied to my columns. So you can see now that the dbt test has failed and is not going to run anything else. The project will stop here, and we can see it has one result. This is probably going to be the row we've added artificially. Okay, so this is how dbt tests work. Now, we've also seen that I've added some descriptions, right? You might ask, like, why are they here? Another cool thing that comes with dbt. So I'm going to say dbt docs generate. And this is going to generate a web page that I'm with the documentation. So we can see that it is building the catalog. It has been written into some JSON, whatever. But now if I'm going to say dbt doc serve, what is happening? We can see that locally a documentation page was generated. And if I open my models in core, I can see that I have a description for my view, a model to aggregate payment data. And great, I can also see the columns, right? I have a column ID, which is the unique identifier for each payment, and we have some generic tests applied. So then you can share this with the business users. They can find whatever they need, or with other developers. They can see what is the meaning of the column just by opening this web page generated by dbt natively. And I've been talking about one reusable code also. So let's say we have this column amount, right? So I'm gonna adjust this code. I'm gonna say we have ID, we have order ID, we have the payment method, and we also had the amount. But let's imagine that the amount that was in the database or in the data, if we take a look, it's like we don't know what is the currency, right? So let's say this can be in dollars, and I want to create a macro convert to Czech crowns. So I can create a macro, and I'm gonna say convert to Czech crowns. I'm gonna say with the column name, and let's say the currency rate. So now if I do this, I have a reusable code for my pipeline. And what if I do now the thing that I'll say, I'm gonna call my macro what is called convert to Czech crowns. I'm gonna use the column amount, and I'm gonna change or set the rate to 23. Now, this is probably not the best practice because the currency, the exchange rate changes every time, but just to give you an idea how this works. So now if I hit dbt run, and I'm gonna only select the payments model again, Now we can see that our model has passed successfully. And if I take a look at the compiled code, we can see that we have another column called amount and check rounds, and which is the column amount multiplied by 23. So I'm gonna push everything into the GitHub now that I have my changes. I'm gonna call it basic demo. I'm gonna go back. So this was the first part of the demo. You've seen what dbt core does, right? But where do we stand now? So what I've shown you was just like a SQL transformation, SQL and Python transformation. It is missing some pieces, right? You see, everything was developed locally. Like, there's probably not going to be a person sitting at 9 a.m. every morning running dbt build, because nowadays you want to have everything automated. So where does dbt core still fall short? It is the missing infrastructure. You still need to have your own cloud provider, such as Azure, AWS, GCP, where you're running or like where you orchestrate the whole solution. dbt core needs to run somewhere. The users need to have some technical skills, right? You need to know how to know with the CLI, or how to set up your virtual environment, or how to use Dockerfile for bigger teams. And also it requires some knowledge of Git. Well, this is not the case with dbt Cloud, also called dbt Platform these days. So dbt came up with a solution that is fully accessible on the public internet. So the users can just log in and start the development right away. Everything is stored in the browser, and they don't have to set up anything locally. So that is cool for the analysts who are not that strong with the technical skills, or you don't have such a strong infra team, and you can run everything in there. The setup is very, very short. So what dbt Cloud really offers, or where they started in 2022. So you see now, just by not having the SQL and Python transformation anymore, you will also be able to orchestrate your solution. So dbt Cloud provides you with the infrastructure that you would have to set up yourself. They also provide with the development IDE. So you saw I was developing in Visual Studio Code, but in dbt Cloud, you can just log in on the website and start the development right away. And the last thing was observability. So you would know when and why your models fail, because you could set up the alerting. In 2024, dbt Labs made a bigger release. They added the semantic layer. So the business users have unified metrics, meanings, and also the dimensions. We also have the catalog. The catalog is something like the dbt docs we've seen before. The page where the documentation is living. Sorry. And now that we have the catalog, again, it is accessible in the dbt Cloud. You don't have to store the URL and host it anywhere, which you would have to do with dbt Core. They also provided you with a visual editor, which is a no-code solution for the analysts to use dbt. And they've added a few more. And then in 2025, we've entered the AI era. So of course, they had to add the Copilot. There was also Mesh introduced, which is kind of a governance solution for dbt Cloud. Iceberg support, which is a thing that resonates in the last days, months. But there's the biggest thing, which is called dbt Fusion. So dbt Fusion is not another product of dbt Labs, what you might think of like dbt Core and dbt Cloud. dbt Fusion is something like dbt Core. But dbt Core was fully written in Python, and dbt Fusion is written in Rust. So it is basically the same product, but it behaves differently on the back end. And what does it bring to the table? Or what does it deliver? So Fusion has SQL comprehension. It has faster runtimes. It is about 30 times faster when it comes to compilation, and 2 times faster when it comes to parsing. And there's also stable orchestration. Now, all of these will save you tons of money. For those who don't know what a SQL comprehension is or what a state-aware orchestration is, I got you from here. So SQL comprehension is something that Fusion does and dbt core did not do. And is that dbt will now understand what is really happening in your project. So now on the left pane, you can see that we have a table or a model called staging customers. We have some columns, right? We have ID, we have first name, we have last name. And on the right, we have our core layer, core customers. Now you can see that I've made a typo, right? It is not the first name, it says first NME, whatever. And dbt Fusion does the thing that it will directly or right away give you a real-time feedback that there's an error, that there's a column that doesn't exist anywhere in the project, or that the column doesn't exist in the staging customers model. Now, this is not the thing with dbt core. With dbt core, if you had the typo, you would just have to run your code, and then it would fail on a database error because the column doesn't exist in the database. And this isn't everything, but I will show you more in the second part of the demo. Now, I've been also talking about the state-aware orchestration. You've seen when I was running dbt run or dbt build, all of the models were built automatically. With state-aware orchestration, it is not the case because, for example, only our raw wizards table has new data. So only everything that is connected to raw wizards will get updated, and the rest of the models will be just reused. Everything will not be the same. These models will stay the same, and only the ones that are starting with wizards will get calculated again because it has actually the new data. Now, you might say, this is cool, but what does it really mean? Let's talk numbers. dbt labs have presented dbt coalesce, which is at dbt coalesce 2025, which is their biggest dbt conference, that just by turning on the state-aware orchestration, they have saved 9% of their costs. With some additional configurations that are possible with state-aware orchestration, they have saved another 55%. In total, it is 64%. Now, again, what is it? What is 64%? dbt labs presented the whole number, and it was about over hundreds of thousands dollars saved annually just by working with state-aware orchestration. So let's go to another demo. I will show you what dbt cloud and dbt fusion is. So let me switch back to the dbt studio. This is how dbt cloud looks when you log in and you want to develop, right? This is the ID. Previously, we've had the Visual Studio Code Editor. Now we have something different. We have the native solution by dbt cloud. Here we can see that I have published the payments models, the staging payments models. So what will happen now? Let me run dbt compile. dbt is running some compilation on the backend. Here we can see that I've been using some references from my staging payments. So let me try to add a with statement. Let's say I'm going to call it with X, and I'm going to say select everything from X. Great. We can see a new feature that dbt Fusion allows, and that is preview CTE. I feel like this is a very cool feature. I wish I've had years ago, because I've been using CTEs quite a lot. So now what I can do with Fusion is I can preview CTE, and it gives me the result of my CTE here. It is not the result of the select here. To prove you right, I'm going to do the thing that I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say select one as ID. dbt Fusion will give me the option to preview another CTE. So if I hit preview CTE here, you'll see that I only see one column, and that is the ID with the value 1. So this is the first cool feature that I'm going to show you that comes with Fusion. Another cool Fusion feature is if you're using select star. Now, I think it happens to all of us that we were wondering what is hiding beneath the select star. Now, if you just hover over, you'll be able to see what the columns are available from the dedicated table. Let me show you another thing. So we were discussing the SQL comprehension, right? What if I just make a typo here and I hit save? Again, I can see that there is no column payment method with the typo meant and what columns are available. Another thing for that's coming with Fusion. And it also understands the syntax on the level of database. So for example, now we are using Snowflake. So let's say, what if I select from my CTE, I'm gonna go with ID and I'm gonna say some amount, or like probably gonna be better if I use payment method. And I'm gonna say amount as like amount per method. And I'm gonna hit save. So again, before I run anything in the database, you'll see that there's an error. And what is the error? I think you might have noticed that I'm missing the group by clause. Again, the payment method, if I hover over, I'll see that there's an unaggregated column in the aggregation context, that the payment method must be aggregated or appear in a group by clause. So if I write group by payment method, and I hit save, everything is working fine as expected. Now, again, if I want, I can preview my CDE. What is the result? It's gonna take some time because of the aggregation. Yeah. And this is great. So now I have real-time feedback. I don't have to make typos anymore because whenever I make a mistake or a syntactic error, dbt Fusion will tell me that I've made something wrong. Now, another cool thing would be is that if we had a function called summarize. Again, this is something weird, right? There is no function summarize. And again, this is because dbt Fusion actually understands what is happening on the background and knows the Snowflake syntax. So it knows that there is no function summarize. Now, if I remove it and get back to sum again, everything will work fine. Okay, so let me revert the changes. And these were the things that I wanted to show you when it comes to development with Fusion. And now we're going to move to stateware orchestration. What I'm going to do here is that I already have a job called dbt build. If I open what the job does, it is running dbt build, right? We've seen that command before. It's just going to run everything in my project. So now I'm going to hit run. And I'll wait for the run to finish. So if I reload, you can see that dbt first cloned my repository. It had created the connection to my database. It has installed all of the dependencies or all of the packages that were needed, and it is running dbt build. Yeah, everything was successful. We can see the green check marks. That is good. We can also see generation of the docs. Everything is working fine. So now, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna run the job again, the same one. You might ask why. It's just to show you the stateware orchestration and how it really works. Nothing beneath that. Yeah. So now we can see that the runtime was 7 seconds. If I take a look at the previous run, it was 12 seconds. You might guess why I've been talking about it previously. So now if I open dbt build, we can see reused. So what dbt did on the backend, it basically didn't run anything because it knew that no data has changed. The data on the row, like the row layer, stood the same. So it didn't need to change anything. So basically, in your case, if you didn't have stateware orchestration, you would rerun all of the tables again, and it would cost you some compute. But now DBT knows that it doesn't need to calculate anything because everything is already done and there are no new data. This is working based on metadata provided by our warehouse. Okay, so we've seen the Saber orchestration too. Might save a lot of money, but let's also take a look at our documentation here in the catalog. So what if I open my payments? I can see this is the model to aggregate the payment data. Now, what Fusion does, and is, I think, super cool for the developers, is it allows to see the column level lineage. So not only you'll be able to see like how the models are connected, you can see that the payment models is being referenced by the staging model, the staging payments, and the staging payments model is referencing the source. Now we can also see what is happening with each and one column used in my lineage. So what if I open the amount? You can see this is a column that we've made a transformation on, right? So it came from the raw payments table. In staging payments, we didn't do anything. And now in the payments model, we've done some transformation on the amount column, and we've called it the amount check crowns. So this is only doable with Fusion as well. So these are some of the features that DBT Cloud and DBT Fusion offers to you. There are more, but since we have a limited amount of time, I cannot get to all of them. So this was another demo I prepared. Let's move back to the presentation. So with DBT Core, I've mentioned in the beginning, we were focused mainly on the transformation part. We were focused on SQL transformation and Python transformation. But now that we have the Fusion and we have cloud, we have a full data control plane. We can orchestrate natively in DBT Cloud. We have some observability. We have the documentation published for everyone, for the business users. We can also connect to the semantic layer. And again, DBT Cloud can connect to all of these mentioned below and many more. These adapters or databases that DBT can connect to are available on their documentation page. This is another picture of how to look on DBT and what is the DBT platform. So like I said, we have the DBT Cloud, right? You have the studio where you can develop. You have the Canvas, which is the no-code editor for analysts. You have Copilot. You can natively orchestrate. You have Catalog for the business users. You have Mesh for governance. And then you can choose either engine. You can use DBT Core, which is written in Python and is available in DBT Cloud, or you can choose the DBT Fusion engine, which was introduced last year. So both of these two engines are available. It's not like it is a separate product, like I said. You can choose either one of those two. This is very important. Yeah, and last but not least, we'll have the comparison. So what is DBT Core? What is Fusion? What does it allow? And what is possible with the platform? So what have you seen is that most of the features that I've done was the development, right? We were writing SQL transformations. We were testing the data. We were writing the documentation, which was somewhere hosted. It has the command line support. And with the AI era, we also have the MCP server. Now, DBT Fusion comes with an extension for VS Code. Some of the features I've been showing in DBT Cloud are also available locally, but the problem is with the VS Code extension that it is just for a limited amount of users from one company. So I think if you have more than 15 users, then you wouldn't be able to use the VS Code extension. With DBT Cloud, you have all of these. And now we were talking about the missing infrastructure, right? DBT Core and DBT Fusion, like I said, are just engines. So there is no infrastructure behind. Everything is being run locally, and you need to provide an infrastructure to orchestrate the whole solution. DBT Cloud provides that. Also, DBT Cloud gives you the IDE where you can develop, as you've seen in the demo. It provides the state-aware orchestration to save the money for tables that are being rerun, but they don't actually contain new data. And then we also have the built-in docs. Again, like I said, it is possible to show you the documentation with dbt core, but you have to host the URL somewhere and then publish it for the business users. In the meantime, when you have dbt cloud, you'll just be able to log in. For CI/CD, which means that your developers will probably not make any mistakes or won't push any errors into your dbt code, you will have to have dbt cloud as well. Again, doable with Core and Fusion, but it takes so much overhead and some technical knowledge. And also natively with dbt cloud, you'll have some logging and alerting, access to the semantic layer via API, or now also available via query builder for the business users. They don't have to write any SQL. They'll just, via no-code solution, access the metrics. Also, the no-code solution is available only for within dbt cloud and the automated version control. Great. So I've been talking about how dbt went over time, what was the evolution, what are the differences between dbt core, dbt fusion, and dbt cloud. Now let's dive a bit deeper into what is coming. So what's going to be the future? Again, last year at dbt Coalesce 2025, at dbt Labs presented a merger with Fivetran. Now, what does this mean? Do you know what is Fivetran? If you don't, I got you. But I'll get to that in a second. Also, what we have now, or what's coming, is the agents, right? Again, we live in an AI era, so we have to have some agents. dbt Labs will provide you with a developer agent. So this developer agent will help the developers build the SQL queries. You will also have the observability agent. So the business users can actually ask, what are my data actual like? What was the last run? Why do my data are not right? Like, what is wrong with that? What was the latest successful run? And then they also have some discovery and analyst agents. Discovery agents means that the user can ask, what is this metric? What does it say? Or what is the meaning of the table or the column? And then they also have the analyst agent. So in dbt cloud, they could directly ask, what are the metrics or what is the revenue in the UI? Now, these are just in beta or coming soon. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show you a demo. Now, with the features that I've mentioned, again, we have the picture of the data control plane. We've seen the orchestration part. We've seen the observability. We've seen the catalog. We've seen the transformation. And now with Fivetran and agents, we'll have also a solution for the ingest part, which was usually the hardest part to do when we had dbt core. Fivetran is a extract and load a tool that will provide you with the data from your source systems into the database. And on top of that, we'll also have the AI agents that can be used by either the developers or the business users. So what is next? If you want to learn dbt in practice, you can check our data academy. You can find the link in the chat. And if you have any more questions, we can connect at LinkedIn, and you'll just scan the QR code, and that should be accessible via that. So if you guys, I'll leave you some time if you want to connect on LinkedIn, and then we will move to the questions in the chat.